So Ellen, are you gonna, do you want to say anything? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I thought you were going to introduce.
Oh, yep. I am. I'm just here to welcome all of you choristers from CCC and anybody on joining us on live stream or a recording of the live stream. We're really lucky to have Andrew Balfour here tonight, interviewed by our associate director Jenna Richards, and with the power of Zoom and the joy of Zoom, we get to visit with and learn more about one of Canada's really awesome composers, not just choral composers, but of many different kinds of music. So sit back and relax. And again, you can see Ellen is the tech person, and she has some protocols here that are in chat. And if you have any difficulties, you can contact her. So over to you, Jenna.
Thanks, and Andrew. Thank you, Marg, and welcome everyone. Sometimes we have unusual choir rehearsals, and one of our joys of this pandemic has actually been these kinds of sessions, which we started last year, where we get to spend some time with a composer. And frequently it's a composer who we've learned about through their music ahead of time. Today, first, before I introduce our guest, I would like to acknowledge that where our choir rehearses is the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and we're visitors here, and we're very thankful for our participation in this land. And I'd also like to invite Andrew, if he would like to acknowledge where he is at the moment. Andrew, I'd invite you to unmute yourself there.
I'm on the land of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Dishless One Spoon Treaty Territory in Toronto. But I'm originally from Treaty 1 territory, and my blood comes from Cree Fisher River First Nation in southwestern Manitoba.
Wonderful, thank you, Andrew. So welcome to tonight's session. Our choir is thrilled to welcome Andrew. He's a composer of Cree descent. He's engaged with collaborators and partners across the country in choral compositions, as Marg mentioned, but also in orchestral and acoustic, electro-acoustic music. He has founded and been the director of formerly Camerata Nova and now Dead of Winter, which we'll talk about the name change later on in tonight's session, for 22 years in Winnipeg. And he's participated in many projects across the country, commissioning works, including projects here in Ottawa at the National Arts Centre. So having first spoken to Andrew this past week, I can tell you that this is going to be a great session. He's such a warm personality. I'm really looking forward to sharing more of his music with all of you. So Andrew, welcome. And right off the bat, I think we're going to introduce you with one of the first works you ever wrote. I think that's correct. It's God Be in My Head. Do you want to talk a little bit about this piece before we hear it?
Yeah, well, first of all, Tansi and Ani and bonjour, and thanks for having me here. It's quite an honor to be able to meet you all, even virtually. Back in 1997, I started Camerata Nova, which is now called Dead of Winter. So it's been a long legacy of choral music, both early music, that's my background, early music, and now contemporary music. And I started writing, composing for Camerata Nova at the time. And this piece, this short, God Be in My Head, which is a beautiful prayer, beautiful text. I set for a dear friend's wedding that was a member of Camerata Nova at the time. And I just remember being in front of the piano, just noodling around and doing some chords and thinking, hey, maybe I'll just write a piece. Like, this is I'd never done it before. I never took composition in university. I started out as a trumpet major, and then I switched to choral conducting. So, but I had enough familiarity with choral music that I kind of take a stab at it. And, for a 1.5 minute piece, I didn't know I would end up here, writing for things like the Toronto Symphony or Vancouver Chamber Choir or whatever. It's been quite a journey, but this is definitely the start of something pretty special, I think.
Wonderful. So we'll come back and talk about your childhood a little bit once we've heard this piece, perhaps. But for now, let's first listen to your choir singing God Be in My Head. kind of unbelievable that that was the first piece that you wrote. It's just so beautiful. I have to say, personally, you know, I think many musicians have probably dabbled at some point in their life in trying to compose something. And I can tell you that anything that I tried to write was never anywhere near that beautiful. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your early years. And you know, this perhaps what some might consider a dichotomy of how you were raised and the different influences and traditions that perhaps were brought to you both as a child and then what you learned about as you grew up. Can you talk a little bit about your different forms of family, what you would consider your different forms of family?
Well, I mean, I was born in 1967, and I'm a 60s scooper. I was taken away from my blood from, you know, it's such a complicated legacy. I mean, I'm one of thousands and thousands that experience this. But at 6 months old, I was taken away from my blood and placed into a family that adopted me. Now, having said that, I was extremely lucky because my family that adopted me was loving and very musical. They might not have had the skills to teach me about my indigenous culture and ways, but that's the way it happens. But as a result of this, I guess, this dichotomy in terms of like, obviously it took a long time to realize that you take any baby away from its mother at 6 months old, it's going to go through trauma, even though you don't remember it. But my father was an Anglican minister, and at that time he was a member of clergy at this church called All Saints Anglican Church in Winnipeg, and it had a very, very active choral program at the time, men and boys. So I was identified as having a very, very good musical ear, and I rose the ranks up to head boy and head soloist, and we went to England every 2 summers. So I was lucky enough to sing in Ely Cathedral, Wells, Durham, York Minster, Gloucester, Lincoln, Peterborough, just going. And so I guess I kind of took those times for granted, but I was definitely exposed to what you would say the C of E choral cathedral tradition. Out of that, I became a great love of early music, you know, Bird and Tallis, Gibbons, Morley, huge, that still influences me in a lot of ways. But also singing Stanford and the Victorian Edwardian repertoire, which I'm not that fond of anymore, but chanting too. I still am a big fan of Anglican chanting. Now, you know, we all got instrumental scholarships, those of us that were deemed worthy of it or that had the want to take up. And there was music festival every year, so we were singing solo. So it was a really intensive program, and we actually, you know, we were rehearsing 3 times a week. We did, you know, Eucharist and Evensong every Sunday. So there was a lot of musical training and bonding, and those friends from the late 70s still remain my best friends. So I have a deep appreciation for what that tradition and that upbringing gave to me. I would not be here without that training and without that support and knowledge of music, but a very Eurocentric or English-centric, of course. But I feel that kind of that was an important part of where I am right now. You know, my father and mother and my family supported a lot of things. They made a lot of sacrifices for me to be able to take music lessons and study trumpet, even pay, you know, for the trips to England and what have you. But it's all part of where I am, and I think that I don't go to church, or I don't call myself a Christian, so to speak, but I certainly respect. And I still actually, you know, before COVID actually happened, I was actually thinking like, I just want to go sing at some church and get, you know, sing the liturgy, because I love the liturgy. I love Evensong. It'd be great to get paid to sing some of that stuff. And Toronto, there's a lot, there will eventually be again, but there's a lot of opportunities to go and sing. And so I miss singing that stuff, I have to say. And when things get back to opening up, I think I might still look into that. But I find myself very fortunate, as opposed to my other brothers and sisters, Indigenous brothers and sisters, that did not have the same, anywhere close to the same experiences I did. They went from foster home to foster home, were abused, exposed to violence and addictions, and you know, that's one of the legacies, or the legacy of the 60 scoop policy that the government did to take the Indian out of the Indian. So, and that's kind of my later journey in life, is to explore that through music.
Well, I find the next piece that we're actually going to listen to is an interesting one. When we were discussing Rosa Mystica, this piece is also one of your earlier works, I believe, but you've actually come back to it, and you've changed, I believe you've changed the language in it now. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's just a recent project. I would say I've lost track. I can say for certain it got to be in my head as my first piece, but I do know that I wrote Rosa Mystica. It's based on the medieval macaronic text of, you know, honoring the Mother Mary. I wrote it in 2003 in Banff. I was actually doing an opera there, and so I basically had a lot of time off, and I was moving around again. I love this text. I love the idea of just honoring the femininity of Christ, and I really feel that this piece meant a lot to me. But I got approached by Alison Mackay, former bass player and programmer for Taffel Music, and Roman Boris, who is the director of the Griffin Trio. And they were working on a project that was involved the Griffin Trio and Nordic Voices, which is probably the most incredible vocal ensemble in the world, based out of Norway. And they wanted me to, or asked me whether it would be possible for me to redo the words for an Indigenous context. So I rewrote the words for this piece called Oma Bindig, here inside. That's the Ojibwe meaning for that. And it's basically they're singing the four directions in Ojibwe. But this text still means a lot to me, and this piece still means a lot to me. So I would say it's probably my fourth or fifth piece, but I mean, it's all a journey. Like some pieces, because I've written so much since then, some pieces still resonate with me, because I know exactly where I was when I wrote it or how I felt. Other pieces I have no conscious memory of, when did I write that? But this piece certainly does.
I really loved when we were discussing this piece and other pieces that had to do with liturgy, or perhaps these traditions, that you can have that separation, that these things can still be beautiful and separated and used in different contexts. So I think that the changes that are coming about in the way that you're writing, they still have those influences, and that's very beautiful. You can hear like how much you love early music and those different traditions that have formed who you are as a musician. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's listen to Rosa Mystica. Is that how you say it? I think I said it incorrectly the first time.
Yeah, Rosa Mystica. Yeah, the mysterious rose.
Wonderful. And I think this is Musica Intima that's singing. Again, just so beautiful. The next,
You
sorry.
gotta love that. Sorry, you gotta love that last line again. I haven't like. It's such a great word, like a great phrase. Leave we all with worldly mirth, and let us, worship this joyful birth. It's good poetry, even though I mean, good poetry all the time, but just the medieval. I think that's one of the things I like about Christmas, because Christmas is so commercialized sometimes. You just get onslaughted with this incredible commercialism. And then sometimes you have to go way back to really appreciate, these beautiful carols and these beautiful texts that, it's just, I find that's the only thing that gets me through Christmas, because if, when you're in a mall or a store, it's just, it's so like an onslaught of incredible, like crafts and
materialism. Yeah.
Yeah, materialism. But it's a real, I'm lucky that choir. I'm going out there to work with them in May, Music Intima, and then we're touring next year, 2023, coast to coast. So it's just such an honor to be able to work with a group like that.
That's fantastic. So we were talking about how sometimes you translate text, and actually the next work that we're going to listen to, I think it has done that as well. I think you took a psalm and translated it into Cree for the act of singing praises. But this piece was a commission, right? And you've told me that one of the great joys that you've had is just working with all of these various groups that you've had a chance to work with. What is that process like, the commissioning process and collaborating with these groups across the country?
Well, I guess career-wise, it's only been the last 4 or 5 years that I've actually come out of Winnipeg, so to speak, because I did have Camerata Nova for 25 years. And so I was familiar with the instrument. I knew exactly who I was writing for. I don't conduct the Camerata very much, just because I decided to switch to composing. But I know what I'm working for. One of the great joys of my late career right now is being able to work with other conductors and other choirs, and to hear different perspectives, and to work and travel before COVID, like doing a lot of traveling and being able to workshop. But this particular project was one of the highlights of my career. I have been living in Toronto now for 4 years. I met my wife in Ottawa actually in 2017 for the sesquicentennial festival that was going on, that was run by the National Arts Center. We were both at a conference, and that's kind of fate that I met her in Ottawa, and then she lives in Toronto, and I moved to Toronto, and things really took off for me. But the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir in 2019 was celebrating their 125th anniversary, the oldest professional choir in the country. And they joined together with the Toronto Symphony, and they commissioned me to do a piece. And on the program was the Stravinsky Symphony of Psalms, and also the Fourier Requiem. And it's a kind of unique programming because there's no violins in the Symphony of Psalms. There's a violin solo in the Fourier, but I kind of felt like, well, this is a great opportunity, because this is what I love about programming music, is to make the entire program flow. So I thought, I'm going to write a piece for choir and viola, cello, and bass, double basses. So I picked Psalm 67 and had it translated. I felt kind of like it was, it was just a great project, because the conductor, who was the interim conductor at the time, David Fowlis, which is a former artistic director of the Toronto Consort, one of the leaders of choral conducting, particularly early music in the country, and a great mentor and a fantastic friend and a neighbor, actually, and he lives here, up around here. I wouldn't be in Toronto had it not been for him. And just to hear at Kerner Hall, the Toronto Symphony and the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir sing this piece was, I get goosebumps thinking about it. It was just, I couldn't believe this prairie boy, coming from out west, and then sitting there hearing his piece played by the Mendelssohn Choir and the Toronto Symphony, directed by David Fowlis. So it was a real, pieces like this I've done, a little bit more in terms of, I love writing for the choirs. I love writing for orchestras, but to put it together, that's why I like it most, because there's so much you can do with choral and orchestra. There's so many sound palettes you can do, and there's so many ways you can go. So this is a real treat of a commission.
I totally agree. And for our choir, who is currently working on the Fourier Requiem, we discussed this as well. The instrumentation is quite different, and so this is beautiful and earthy feeling of all those low strings all together. So let's listen to this now. Now, I will just say it's only an excerpt. It's not the whole thing, but you can go find the whole thing later. And I know that you'll want to after you hear this. So let's listen to the act of singing praises. So as I said, only an excerpt. Unfortunately, we don't have time to listen to the whole thing, but I know people will go back and find that video on YouTube following. I'd love to talk a little bit about the amazing diversity of Indigenous music that we have in Canada, and the idea of perhaps trying, making the effort to showcase that mosaic in a better way moving forward. The next piece that we're going to listen to, I just love all of the incorporations that you've made. And this is something that you do actually quite frequently in music that you're composing now, you know, leaving open scores or having different forms of instrumentation or bringing in theatrical components. This particular piece has didgeridoo, it has throat singing, it has some really incredible artists, and it brings together various traditions. Can you speak just a little bit about how this work happens and how other people can perhaps try to engage in a way that brings these groups together in more collaborative ways moving forward, which I think is something that many people are trying to accomplish these days, these more collaborative practices?
I think it's the only way that the art is going to survive. The art of music making, whether it's choral, orchestral, theater, dance, you know, to get out of our individual silos. And, you know, it worked for so long, especially, I guess, when you think of the days of the Anglo-centric power structure of Canada, or the country Canada. And it affected music too, because it would always be some English guy, you know, running a choir, or no diversity. Canada is a mosaic. It has been for some time, but it was never truly represented in the arts, you know, scene or the choral scene. I have nothing against Healy Willen. I love Healy Willen's music. I still do, but that kind of dominated the choral landscape for so long, and it didn't really take in an essence of the other incredible mosaics of this country, whether it be Asian or African or South American, or and then again the first people, indigenous. And I think that slowly but surely we are recognizing things that have been so lost in our, you know, I think for the first time I can see a Canadian choral identity rather than again the Willen or the Alma Islers, and nothing wrong with those composers or their music, but I'm seeing a real kind of diversity happening in choral music. And ironically, it's only really being talked about in the past few years because choral directors and choristers are not planning concerts in regular lives. They have a lot of time on their hands to do research and to communicate through technology. And I think that even though that we should be getting together and singing and doing concerts and being together in the same room, I think this reset, this pause, will allow us to actually come out of this with true diversity, true demarginalized, you know, like, you know, and not only for the singers themselves and the composers and the directors, but for audiences, because we need fresh ears, we need fresh spaces. We don't always have to do concerts in churches. We don't always have to have tuxedo and black dresses and folders and risers. We can do it in such a different, more diverse ways. And I think people are thinking about that now that we're on a pause and we're such an unprecedented times. But I'm an optimist, and I feel that it's important for us to be able to grow and expand. I'm also, like, you know, without, you know, Mozart rethinking Haydn, without Beethoven rethinking Mozart, and, you know, without, like, you know, Schubert rethinking Beethoven, we wouldn't be, you know, there's no stagnancy, even in classical Eurocentric music. It always grows. It needs to grow. And I don't believe that choral music should be concertized. I think that it's a living experience. It's a living organism, sorry. Well, it could be an orgasm too, but it's a living experience to be able to, you know, to go through. I think that, you know, the process of programming music is over. I think that there needs to be meaning for people to be able to come to concerts and to be able to experience something rather than, oh, here's a John Rutter, or here's an African spiritual. You know, I think it needs to be an experience for people. And, you know, I think that there are still masterpieces, like you're doing the Fourier Requiem, that's to be still performed. It's a beautiful piece. It's spiritual. It can be spiritual. And I think both for the singers and the audience, these pieces still need to be performed. But there are new things coming up, you know, in terms of new composers, new generation of indigenous composers that really deserve to be heard, and that's important for us.
Absolutely, and you know, it's interesting as you're saying that, you know, this idea of even historically the way that Anglo-centric music has progressed. It's progress that's happening, and these things have gone in cycles. I mean, we used to have the idea of a concert as we have now never existed before, you know, the late 1800s. So it's not even something that necessarily has to remain as it is, and it does need to continue to change, evolve, I think. I totally agree. I think that the pandemic has allowed us this kind of breathing space that artists don't often have, because it is usually when's the next concert, or how are we preparing for this, or something else. But now there has been a lot of conversation and a lot of, I think in some ways, unifying discussion, and hopefully respectful discussion that will lead to a different, as you said, I think, Canadian choral tradition. So the next piece that we're going to hear is by Camerata Nova, and it's again only an excerpt, and it features a number of collaborators. And the first section that you'll hear here is with a throat singer and didgeridoo player, and then it will continue with Jeremy Dutcher, who is probably familiar to many of our choir members, and then a short choral section. But it is a much larger work, so I would love it if you'd introduce this particular work, Andrew.
It's called Galmanik, the Inuktitut word for bright aura. And it's a piece that I wrote in 2017 with conjunction with Madeleine Alakari-Alak, who the throat singer you'll hear here. I got a grant to go up to Halawit to work with her. That's another world up there, like terrain-wise. It's like the Arctic is so. I wish every Canadian could go up there and see what it's just another incredible, powerful landscape. But it's based on the story of when Frobisher came to Baffin Island in the late 16th century and thought that he had discovered Asia, which of course is ridiculous. It wasn't even close. But to him, that the Inuit people looked Asian in their mind. So he brought back forcefully Inuit people to come back to prove that he had been to Asia. None of them survived the voyage back. It's a huge tragedy when you think about it. But so Madeline and I talked about this idea of sort of like this one girl and this powerful Inuk woman that, you know, was taken, and just it was a fictional story. There's no real actual story particularly, but it's just more of a generalization of condensing that tragic story into one girl. But yeah, this piece took a lot of work and collaboration with Madeline and Jeremy Dutcher, but it was a really powerful project to work on, because I got to travel up to the north, to Baffin Island.
Wonderful. Let's listen to this now. So again, for anyone who'd love to listen to that entire work, it is on YouTube. It's a half an hour long work, and you could only hear a few minutes of it here, but I'm sure you could tell how powerful it is. So please go visit that following the session. That was, of course, your group, Camerata Nova, which has now changed its name. Do you want to talk a little bit about why, and perhaps where the initial name came from, and where you've moved to, and how that's come about?
Well, going back to the fact that I was such a huge, I mean, I don't mind calling myself an early music geek. You know, like I grew up back in the days of record collections, particularly like in the early days, you know, collecting King's College, Cambridge, or St. John's, or, you know, all those, you know, early recordings of men and boys choirs singing early music. And then, you know, when the Tallis Scholars broke through in the early 80s with CDs, and that changed the landscape of choral music really with the CDs. And they certainly made their career, Tallis Scholars that is, in terms of CDs, and made them world famous. You know, and then just the scene in Europe in the late 70s and early 80s was such transforming. And then generally a Gardner and the Monteverdi choir, I mean, the Baroque soloists were really, you know, really doing incredible stuff that was so risky and transformative in the way that people approached early music. Like in Manitoba, every year when I was a kid, Messiah was sung by hundreds of, you know, choristers and a full orchestra, and it was just, you know, so slow. I mean, not at the time when I was just a kid, I just loved the music, but it was just like a huge, massive freighter going so slow, and then to hear it with period instruments and to hear like dancing vitality to Baroque music that we didn't hear before was exciting. But you know, when I started Camerata Nova, we're still kind of that tradition in Manitoba. So I wanted to have a smaller choir, and I wanted to do early music, and the natural, you know, name that I always liked was Camerata. Like it just, I mean, there's so many different Cameratas in Europe or all over the place, particularly, you know, in North America, there's the Boston Camerata, but I like the name. And once we started getting, adding contemporary music to our programming of seasons, we just decided, well, let's put Camerata Nova, kind of like makes sense to us. And that name has served us well for 25 years. We're very happy with it. But over the pandemic, and over the past 6-7 years, as we do our Truth and Reconciliation series, which everything that we do Indigenous collaboration or based is part of our Truth and Reconciliation series. We decided kind of we wanted to get away from a Eurocentric name or a Latin name. We were fortunate enough that we have an incredible board of directors, an incredible administrative team and vision. And we spent a lot of time. Anybody that thinks it's easy to change a name, it's not. There's like philosophical, legal, geographic obstacles and discussions to be had. So something that I thought was going to be absolutely easy to do, and I was against it at first. I thought, no, why would we change our name? That's just, you know, that's cheating on ourselves. And is that a gimmick coming out of the, you know? But I was slowly won over, and also the fact that geographically, you know, the group is based in Winnipeg, and you know, and it identifies where we're from. And Winnipeg is a huge artistic hub, particularly in the winter. You know, it's like one of the most famous one of the most famous new music festivals in the world is the Winnipeg Symphony's New Music Festival. They've had everybody there over their 30 years. They've had everybody, Parrot, Philip Glass, John Colleon, like everybody, like and that happens. Well, it happened last week online, of course, but it happens always in the January, in the dead of winter. So we kind of wanted to grab hold of our identity, and also geographically speaking. And let's face it, we want new audiences. We want new experiences, and a lot of younger people, millennials, or whatever you want to call them, Gen X, or whatever they're called, are not that hip about being able to go to a church, pay $40, sit in uncomfortable pews, being surrounded by people that are 2-3 times their age. Like we need to make it more of an experience for people to be. I mean, because let's face it, if they can go on YouTube or Spotify or iTunes and listen to the Monteverdi Vespers at home and with a glass of wine and not have to spend $60, then why would they go to an uncomfortable venue and not being able to, Now we know that only choral music live gives that incredible experience, the vibration. So it's a process. It took us a long time, and we decided that we went through it. I'm proud of our team and what we did and be able to. But also, I have no I think we find our own way sometimes. I don't mind, I still feel like I think there's a lot of cool things happening in the choral world, and whether you're called Tallis scholars or whatever, it's like it doesn't make a difference as long as you're reaching out to people and acknowledging that you want to make your space welcome for everyone. Is the most important thing.
Absolutely, I agree. The next piece that we're going to listen to is Vision Chant, which I think is familiar to some people in our choir. And this particular recording is an audio recording, but it does feature an Indigenous artist, Jerry Whitehead, I think his name is. And so we're going to listen to this piece. It's the Canadian Chamber Choir, and it's a Cyprus music recording, which again, Cyprus music is very familiar to our choir. Would you like to say anything about Vision Chant before we hear it?
Well, I'm very proud of this piece. It's part of a larger work called Bawajigaywin. It's the third movement. Bawajigaywin means vision quest. So Vision Chant, this piece you're going to hear is the third movement. It was originally written for the Kingston Chamber Choir in 2014.
Wonderful. And just before we listen to that, Ellen, I will mention for our choir, you're more than welcome to drop questions into the chat function. We have one more work following this one to listen to before we'll get to a little bit of Q&A, but think about your questions so that you can submit them in chat. Okay, let's listen to Vision Chant.
Yeah.
So you alluded to a project that's upcoming for you in May, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that before we get to our final piece, which our choir has sung in the past, Ambe. So for those who would want to sing along, if you have a score nearby, feel free to pick that up. But you have this fantastic project that you're working on, and you'll explain it much better than me, but my very limited understanding of it is that it's kind of about what could have happened if respect had gone both ways with Europeans and First Nations peoples. Do you want to speak a little bit about this project?
Yeah, that's a project with Musica Intima, the choir that you heard sing Rosa Mystica earlier, and they're based in Vancouver. They're actually an incredible ensemble. They're an unconducted ensemble of 12 singers. And Jacob Grammett is the artistic director. They also have an early music background, but also they champion Canadian composers, and they have been for some time. He approached me a couple of years ago, actually just as the pandemic started, and wanted to know about whether I'd be interested in curating a concert. And we were talking about indigenous issues and what we do, but I threw him a curveball. I said, well, what if we did an early music Elizabethan concert, but reimagining the relationships between indigenous and Europeans. And I mean, this did happen in the very, very early, early 17th centuries, and this was all kind of, like a political and military, but the British brought over a lot of chiefs, Iroquois chiefs, and treated them like VIPs in London and what have you, but only in the interest to basically sway their alliances towards the British against the French. The French did it as well. So that's kind of the start of sort of the breaking of the nations and taking away any alliances on Turtle Island or North America, and purely for political reasons. But this concert that we're doing, it's called the Gano, which means sing in Cree, is basically a reimagining of what would happen if real diplomacy, real respect between nation to nation would have happened, and where we would have been if the Europeans had been able to really, really respect other human beings rather than the genocide that had happened later. So what I've done is taken a lot of Elizabethan anthems and motets, particularly by Bird, because Bird remains one of my favorite, maybe just favorite composers. I think his music is incredible, incredibly complex, incredibly beautiful, and redone the text to Ojibwe or Cree, not translate, because I don't necessarily follow the words, but I've had to, it took a long time. I'm still working on it right now, so to speak, is to change, without changing the music, changing the text. But Ojibwe and Cree are very singable for European singers or for English singers, because the vowels are similar. So it's a process. We'll do that concert in Vancouver in May, and then next year, 2023, we're going to take it on a tour across the country. So it's a really exciting project.
Well, we'll look out for that. I'm sure everyone from our choir would love to see it here when it comes across the country. So our last piece, I can't believe we're already at our last piece, but our choir has sung Ambe. And I know when we spoke, you mentioned that this piece was kind of a breakout piece in some ways, and that it has just gone internationally and has been wildly popular. I know our choir really enjoyed singing it. Do you want to introduce this piece before we hear it?
Yeah, this was commissioned by Catherine Robbins, choral professor at the University of Manitoba. And I didn't know what I was getting into. This is actually one of the pieces that I talked about earlier, but I don't remember writing. And which is ironic, because it's my most popular piece, I guess. Or I mean, I love it, but I just don't remember the specifics about it. But I do kind of feel that this piece, because the words were gifted to me by a songkeeper named Corey Campbell, who is a Ojibwe from Saugeen First Nation. As you might see, I've seen that in the notes in the music. He gifted me the words, And he said, basically said, do whatever you want with it. And I decided, okay, I'm not going to transcribe the song, the original song. I just wanted to do something different that I felt would be accessible for choirs. It's very, very important when you do something like this, especially when you've been gifted with something, that for people that don't know Cree or this tradition or even Ojibwe language, is to make it as accessible, but also to make sure that all the protocols are in place for it to be a real honor. You know, I mean, it's been for so long, and choir directors and choristers don't want to, because they don't want appropriation, or they don't want to disrespect, so they won't do it. This piece is kind of a breakout piece for me, not for my career or, you know, publishing or whatever. It's important that in the true spirit of reconciliation, is I do want to see non-Indigenous people celebrating Indigenous medicines, words, culture, blood, or whatever, but in the proper, respectful way. And I feel this piece, along with Cyprus, along with all the work that Catherine Robbins did to make sure that the, you know, the phonetics and the language was respectful. To me, that's the important work. It took a lot of work, but I will continue to work as much as I can and rely on my allies to make sure choirs like yourself can celebrate this piece. Ambe, come in, like, let's celebrate. Like, let's, you know, I do a lot of heavy stuff sometimes too, but I also kind of want to celebrate things where we can all celebrate together, because that's the only way we're going to get to reconciliation.
That's beautiful. Let's listen to it. Ambe with the Kronos Maple Ensemble. Awesome. Well, I think if everyone were here, they would, of course, give you a big round of applause. And thank you, Chimiguesh, hi, for being here with us this evening. It's been such a pleasure. And before I open up the floor to questions, which people are welcome to put into the chat, I'd invite also our conductor, Marg, just to say one or two words herself as well, because I know that she also has some questions for you and would have loved to ask them of you during this time too. So I'll just pass it over to Marg for a minute here.
No, I'm really looking forward to meeting you and working with you. If we can do that, it would be great in the next year, although you've got your work cut out for you there with the tour. I think I was just really interested. It's not even a question. I was just really fascinated by, first of all, your interest in Renaissance music and your even attempting to, was it Lamentations of Jeremiah?
Yeah.
Thomas Tallis, that
Yeah.
that you've translated them into Ojibwe?
Well, the snippet that you heard in like comedy at that last choral part, that was direct. That was the Latin from the Lamentations, which I feel is one of the masterpieces of the Elizabethan. That piece still gets me. We've sung it many times with Camerata.
Yeah.
But for the music intima, I will be taking some of the bird anthems or motets and setting them to distinct like Ojibwe or Cree texts.
Wow.
It's so hard, honestly, because it's so hard because I do not want to change the music.
Right.
You know, that's a challenge. I mean, I started it in the early pandemic days, and it took me a long time. I'm still not 100% comfortable. So when we start rehearsing in May, I'll probably change some things. But it's a real experience. As a composer, I've never done anything like it because I'm not composing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep the integrity of the polyphony and also the importance of the word. So yeah. I hope to get better at it in the future.
I can't imagine there's many people doing that anywhere.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I'm interested also in some of the sound of the drones you have in some of your music, and some of it reminded me of Norwegian folk song. So I'm interested that you're going to be working with Nordic voices and some of the I guess Norwegian and mostly Norwegian folk songs that I've heard. I have a CD of them too, over and over. I play it over and over. There's a lot of similarities to me, so it's very interesting.
Yeah, I've always been interested in drones. I guess mostly because of the fact that I was interested again from the European perspective of Hildegard von Bingen, Sequentia. When they first came out with their albums, did a lot of droning with hurdy-gurdies and then Jordi Savall and stuff like that. So there's a lot of I've always loved the drone. When we originally did Rosa Mystica for our second or third CD, way back when people were still making CDs, we used a crystal bowl, and which I still like the sound because I think they're a little bit warmer than Tibetan brass bowls because it's hard to keep it going on Tibetan brass bowls. Whereas crystal bowls, once you get it, I think. But I'm always about drones, honestly, or even just vocal drones as well too. But I've been doing a lot of sound design in the past 10 years, so I'll electronically I'll start with a drone and work my way up, so to speak.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. That's all from me. I'm really looking forward to meeting you sometime. It'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. Me too.
Wonderful. Harry, go ahead.
Yes,
Harry.
I have a question from YouTube land. And
Yep.
it may be related to the droning that you were just talking about, but Quinn Redicop says that your music has this wonderful way of blending an ostinato, that's a new term to me, or a single repeated note throughout with a complex and constantly changing harmony structure, usually in the upper voices. Can you talk about how your writing process works and how you come up with such interesting chord and chord changes? And also, can you talk about the significance of the ostinato in your writing? I assume you know what ostinato means. I didn't.
Well, I guess again, I never took harmony I did just took harmony. We all took harmony in university, but it was a class that I wanted to get out of the way and go rehearse, or go to choir, or practice, or go to the pub. Who knows? It depends on what I felt, but it was. I kind of feel that I just do it instinctively. I don't think about particular terms or chord structures. In fact, if I was asked to analyze any of my choral scores, I would fail. I would really fail. I write what I feel is that it sounds good to me, and I write on a computer. I use Finale, So I'm used to it now. I'm not a very good keyboardist, so it's hard for me to play polyphony or counterpoint. So I use my computer as my tool, and I just kind of I know choirs enough that okay, this is going to work. It's still a bit dreary sometimes when you listen to the MIDI file, like okay, but then when you hear it for the first time, then it's like yes, that worked, it worked. But I've been doing it long enough that I kind of know what I want. I use a lot of cluster chords. Yes, ostinato, but also kind of like I try to do it instinctively. I just kind of know what I want to hear. I wrote a piece maybe 3 years ago for the acclaimed group called Roomful of Teeth. Talk about crazy names, from New York, and they're a Pulitzer-winning, Grammy-winning, like they're the Cirque du Soleil of the choral world. They're ridiculously good, but they're not a choir. I would say that they're more like a band. I wrote a crazy hard piece for them because I knew I could. I wouldn't normally write for choirs that way, but I just tried to see what I could do and what they could do, and they can do anything. But it was fun. It was a great experience. But to me, it was like writing for a string quartet or like a world famous string quartet. It's just a lot of pressure. There's a lot of sort of like expectancy when you're writing for a group like that. I still prefer to write for choirs, like in the choral sense, because I still feel I have lots of things to say, but I do like upper voices. I do like lots of clusters. And I do like to use a lot of lower voices to keep it going, whether it's a drone or a rhythmic aspect to keep the machinery going, I guess, the choral machinery. And I have to say that my biggest influence, and I hope I don't copy him, but is Parrot. Ivo Parrot's music is the absolute, is my kind of contemporary, or like somebody that I know that's still living that has influenced me the most. And everybody talks about all the ways they get the minimalist, or like all the words they use for him. There's no words to describe his music. What he has done, and what he continues to do, as long as he's still here on Mother Earth, is to just bring the voice to a heavenly or spiritual space. And I think that's, to me, it's like when I was in University of Manitoba back in the early 90s, when we first sang the Magnificat by Parrot, blew my mind, because I came from the silo of Anglican music where it was Stanford and Howells, and I'd never heard anything like Parrot. It blew my mind. So it probably influenced me to where to change my direction out of brass to choral, but he still remains an influence to me.
He suspends things in time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great way. He opens up that little kind of weird little portal of time continuum and makes you really kind of like, okay, I'm here. I'm listening to every single note. They're not even notes anymore. It's like energy.
I agree.
So, that's the way I feel about his music.
For those who did want to know what ostinato was, I'm not sure if any of us ended up saying it. So I'm just going to say in one quick sentence that ostinato just means the repetition of a short melodic or rhythmic figure. So like in ambe, we have ambe, 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 ambe. That would be like an ostinato that goes on throughout the piece. For those who are interested in that. Harry, do we have any other questions from, as you described it, YouTube land?
Yes, one more. Again, Mr. Redekop wants, or he's glad to hear you say you want others to pay tribute to First Nations. And he's actually written a piece, and he consulted others as part of the process. And he wonders what you do as far as consulting, or what sort of consulting you think is important for people to do, to really pay tribute to, Indigenous people in their music.
No, that's a good question. I think it's about establishing a relationship. And I'll use an example, a musical example. It's very specific. It's about the Huron Carol. Over the legacy of the Huron Carol, again, especially within the church, like that's kind of like for so many years, or for generations, it's been utilized as that's an indigenous tune, and it's, you know, we can sing it in hymn, we can talk about the great Gitche Manitou and what have you. And then the past 50 years, I know choral directors that have like done the arrangements, and they said, "Oh, I've talked to my elder," or I've talked to an elder, and I have permission to do this, or I have like their consent. I think that it is difficult. You have to really establish a relationship with a community or an elder or a language keeper or a song keeper before you, if you're non-Indigenous, to be up to really present something that's sort of like, I'm establishing a relationship or an artistic statement or a musical statement. We're in a complex time right now. So I would say that there's nothing wrong with saying, I want to write about this, or I want to write these words, or I want to work with, but it's going to be a little bit more lengthier for somebody that's non-Indigenous and even somebody that's Indigenous. It's taken me a long time, and I'm not totally 100%. I've made a lot of mistakes. I mean, I'm just going to acknowledge the fact that clip you saw, Communique, with the didgeridoo player and the Inuit throat singer, I shouldn't have added the didgeridoo. You know, I got, you know, a little bit of flack from that, like, because the didgeridoo has nothing to do with Inuit throat singing, and that didgeridoo player was not Australian Indigenous. So, you know, I'm learning all the time, and I know it's complex, that this might not help answer the question you asked. I think that it's slow moving when it comes to the way that we want to establish a relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous. In the music world, all I'm seeing is respect from choir directors and choristers and admin people. I think it's just you have to be very careful if you want to sort of do something that's Indigenous based and you're not Indigenous, no matter who you get sort of worked with or collaborated with, it's very important how you present it and be able to back up who you talk to, what's the relationship. It's hard enough now for Indigenous artists or anybody being called out in the past little while. You know, such and such is not Indigenous. They said they were, but I mean, it's been all over the media in the past couple of years. And we ourselves are in a lot of trauma. The graves of the little ones in the residence school sites. Still continues to murder the missing women. There's a lot of turmoil and there's a lot of complex things. So we're still trying to deal with that within our own community, but we're also working with, you know, non-Indigenous people and politicians and medical and healthcare workers. So it's complex, but I do appreciate the question. I also feel that you're definitely, I definitely feel that what you can do is you read. Somebody just actually posted something of Buffy St. Marie. Read Buffy's book, her autobiography. That's a step in the right direction. And also read Hungry Listening by Dylan Robinson. It's a tough read, but it's meant for everybody that's non-Indigenous to see how complex, but also there's still hope and there's still a path towards true reconciliation, which might take generations.
Okay, I would like to say thank you so much, Andrew, on behalf of our choir for joining us. And we do really, really, really hope that we can see you in person at some point in the future, work with you. And thank you for sharing all of your music and your stories with us this evening on this very cold February day, wherever everyone's listening from. I will invite Harry to say a final word if he'd like to. And otherwise, thank you everyone for tuning in. Chimigwech.
Thank you, Jenna. Another sterling interview. Thank you very much. Marg, did you want to add some thoughts before I wrap up?
No, I would just say that next week we're back to hybrid rehearsals. We'll give you an idea of how that's going to work in an email. So we're quite excited. February the 8th, next Tuesday, back to some kind of group at the church. We'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. We'll have some more announcements after YouTube. live stream ends. But I want to thank Andrew for coming so far tonight. That was great, all the way across the country. And we would like to thank our sponsors who are continuing to sponsor our choir even in these years when we can't put on concerts. Prospectus Associates, a public affairs company here in town, Habitat for Humanity, again, the local Ottawa branch, and the City of Ottawa all provide support to our choir and keep us going. And if you enjoyed attending this session tonight and you would like to support us in doing future events like this, please go to our website and there's a donate button there that you can click on to show your support. Anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. So we're going to be shutting off the YouTube, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in the future, probably in a concert soon, we hope. Anyway, thank you to all the people who came in on YouTube, and I'll say goodnight, and the people on Zoom, just stay where you are.